In this video, I'm going to show you how to keep your user interfaces manageable using the GUI builder in IntelliJ. And I'm also going to demonstrate how to set up a JTable in your user interface and fill it with data for your demo screens. And I'm going to start by creating a new project. And I'm just going to use the default settings for this. I'm using JDK 1.8, which is pretty old at this point, but it should be pretty much the same for all the newer versions. And I'll go ahead with a command line app template. Let me go ahead and put this in demo UI. And my base package will be edu.pcc.mark .demo UI. So my project is pretty much empty. I have a source folder. It's got a package in there with main. And the first thing I want to do is put in some code that's going to launch a GUI. And so the way you do that is you run a thread using swing utilities.invoke later. So swing utilities.invoke later, and that takes a new runnable. And this is going to be the thing that actually starts my GUI. So I'm going to go ahead and call a method create GUI, which I have to write. And let me go ahead and add that here. So that's going to be private static void create GUI. Takes no arguments. And then I have some boilerplate here. The first thing I want to do is make a GUI. So we'll call that main UI. UI is new. And then I need a main UI class, which I'm going to build using the form designer. And then I want to expose a method on that main UI class that I can use to get the root panel. So that's going to be jpanel root is UI dot get root panel. And then I want to make a frame to display my GUI in. And then frame dot set default close operation. And this is going to be what happens when I click on the close box. So for this, I'm just going to do exit on close. And then I want to add my user interface UI, actually the root panel, to the frame that I'm displaying. So that's going to be frame.set content pane to root. And then let's pack the user interface. And then we're going to set the location relative to null, and that will center our UI on the screen. And then last thing we're going to do is show the UI. Okay, so that's the stub to display the UI. Let's go ahead and make a UI now. And I'm going to go ahead and create a package inside of demo GUI for my user interface stuff. And the reason why I'm doing this will become clearer when we talk about N-tier architecture. But for now, I'm going to make a package, and I'm going to call it UI. And then inside my UI, I'm going to create a new GUI form. And I'm going to call it main UI. And here's my UI. Right now, it just has a JPanel at the top. I'm going to name that JPanel root panel. And then if I look at my main UI C class, I see that I have root panel defined as a JPanel. So I'm going to add a method called public JPanel get root panel, and that's going to return root panel. And that should be everything I need to link main to my GUI. I have to go ahead and import, so I'm going to hit Alt plus Enter import class, and that adds my import of UI.mainUI. That should be everything to run the thing. So let me go ahead and hit the run button, and I should get an empty GUI right in the middle of the screen. And I do. So here's my empty GUI right in the middle of the screen. And if I hit the close box, it closes and goes away. So now let's go ahead and stub in the UI form. And the trick for keeping this manageable is the default layout for this frame, or for this panel rather, is Grid Layout Manager, which is a fairly flexible grid, but it tries to line up things in horizontal and vertical directions. And if you have things that don't really need to be lined up or want to be lined up, then it becomes really awkward to work with. So what I like to do to keep things manageable is group functional components together inside of a panel, and then mainly have those panels be either managing UI elements left to right or managing UI elements top to bottom. So this main root panel for me, that's going to be top to bottom, and I'm going to have a JPanel inside of there. Actually, let me go ahead and get rid of these spacers. So now I have a JPanel that takes up all of my JPanel, and I'm going to add another JPanel underneath that. So I'm just going to go ahead and select right there. So this first JPanel here, that's going to be my label, and then the second JPanel is going to be some controls that I can use. And then the third JPanel is going to be my table, and then the fourth JPanel will be some buttons at the bottom. So this first JPanel, I'm just going to have a label. So let's go ahead and put the label here. And I'm going to go ahead and my horizontal alignment will be center for that. And I'm going to adjust the font size as well. So let's go ahead and make that a 16-point bold. And I'm going to change the text. So what I'm going to use for this demo is data out of the IMDb database that we use in CIS 275. And I'm going to display the most popular shows of particular types from particular genres ordered by popularity. So for my label, I'll just go ahead and say popular shows. And then the second JPanel is going to have a JTable in it. So let's go ahead and add the JTable. But you don't want to just put a JTable in here. Actually, what you want to do is you want to have a scroll pane, and then you want to have the JTable inside of that scroll pane. So let me go ahead and delete the table that I just added and drag a scroll pane inside first, and then put the JTable inside of that scroll pane. And it's showing me where the table is, but these headers and the cell values aren't actually going to show up when I run the app. So I'll come back to that. And actually, I said that I wanted the second thing to be some controls. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this scroll pane down into that JPanel. And then let me get rid of the horizontal and vertical spacers because I wanted to fill that whole panel. And then here what I'm going to do is I'm going to have two combo boxes and a type-in box. So let's go ahead and put a combo box here. Actually, let's fill the whole thing. And then I'm going to put another combo box on the side here. And then I'm going to end up with a spacer, but let me go ahead and put a text field in here. So that's going to be a type in box. And then for the type in box, let's go ahead and put a spacer here. And then the size of this type in box, I'm going to make it be, I think, 100 by -1. So 100 pixels wide. And actually hit tab there, and I shouldn't. When you hit tab on these controls, you get indent, which is not actually what I want. So let me fix that. Okay. And then I want this to be flush on that side. So I'm going to go ahead and set my horizontal alignment to be right. And actually, I probably don't need this at all. Let me get rid of that. Yeah, get rid of that horizontal spacer. So now I have two combo boxes on the left and one text box on the right. And I'm going to give some of these names. So I want to be able to talk to the combo box in code. And I'm going to use this for genre. So let's call this genre combo. And then let's call this one type combo. And then we're going to call this text box number of votes field. Actually, it should be min votes field. So the basic idea here is we're going to select the genre action, adventure, fantasy, science fiction, romance, whatever in this box. And then this box, we're going to select the type of thing we're searching for, like TV series, movie, I don't know what all else. And then this is going to be the minimum number of votes for a rating. And then in the table, we're going to show the top 50 or so matching shows that met these criteria. Then at the bottom, we're going to add a couple of buttons. So let me add a button here and a button here. And then I want these to be lined up on this side of the screen, so I'm going to put a spacer in on this side. So this button I'm going to use for, let me see, episode ratings. And so we'll call the text. And that's going to be grayed out eventually, but right now we're not going to worry about it. And then this button is going to be IMDb page. So we'll call that IMDb button. And the text will be IMDb page. And that looks reasonable. So let's go ahead and run it and see what we have so far. Okay, so these don't have any values yet, and so they look pretty empty. And then there's nothing in the table, so it doesn't display as well. Buttons are there. The other thing that you can do to make the interface look a little better is to space things out a bit. So since we have everything in these 4 frames, so frame for the label, frame for these controls, frame for the table, and frame for the buttons, we can add some padding to separate them so that they look a little better. So I'm going to start at the top here. And this first J panel, I'm going to go ahead and add margins. And I'm just going to be a little subtle about it. So for the top and bottom, I'll just add 5 pixels. And then for left and right, I'll add 10 pixels. And I think that will be okay because these are going to be stacked top to bottom. So 5 for the top and 5 for the bottom, it will add up. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. So 5, 5, and 10, 10. And then we'll do the same thing for this one. And then for the last one. Okay, so let's run it, take a look. Okay, so now we have some space between each of the groups. Now let's go ahead and actually show some of this content. So this table here, this is going to be my show table. And let's go ahead and start with that. Oops. So here's my show table. Everything looks good. Let's go to main.ui. And I'm going to go ahead and put a constructor in here. So this is going to be public main UI. And I'm not going to pass anything in, at least not yet. I'm going to have a method called create table. And that's going to be private void create table. So the way that you show data in a table is by creating a model. And the abstraction here is that the table is the thing that actually does the display part. But the actual data is controlled through the model. So the model is attached to the table and the data goes in the model. You change the data in the model, that changes the contents of the table as they're displayed. And then there's also a model for the columns. So when you make and set a model on the table, that is what allows you to show data in the table. And I know that sounds a little complicated, but it's actually easier to use than it is to explain. So to create the table, the first thing we're going to do is we have this show table here. And let's go ahead and say show table dot set model, and then we're going to make a new default table model. And then we want to pass two things into that. So the first thing that it's passing in is a model for the data. And let's just pass in null for now. And then the second thing you want to pass in is what columns are in the table. A new string array. And we're going to initialize that to hold the name of our columns. So the first column will be title. And then let's go ahead and say year. And then we'll have rating. And then num votes. So that's going to be a table with 4 columns in it and no data at this point. So let's go ahead and run it and see what we get. Okay, so now we have our header, title, year, rating, number, votes. And then if we wanted to put some data in here, it's going to be a little complicated to put here. So let's just, for now, we want an array of objects. And if we use object here, they can be strings or numbers or whatever we want them to be. And then basically you want an array for each row. So an array of objects for each row, which is going to be how you want the values to display in each column of the table. And then you want an array of those for the full table. So an array of rows, and then each row is an array of cells. And then you can initialize that to be like so. So that's going to be data equals that. And then we're going to pass data in here as the data. Okay, so let's go ahead and put some values in here. And I'm going to stack them like so. And we'll fill in the first one. Actually, we'll do 3 by hand. So let's say inception was, let's actually take a look. So here's a query that I'm going to use to fetch data out of the database. And I'm going to cover that in a later video when we get to like week 3 or so. But the basic idea here is these are the action movies with more than 50,000 votes, ranked from most popular to least popular, and the top 50 of those. So, and I'm just going to type in some of this data so that we have something that we can see. So let's scroll that a little bit. And okay, there we go. All right, so The Dark Knight is 2008 and 9.0 1886938, and then Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, 1980, 8.8 962165, and we'll do one more. Okay, so that's an array of arrays. And then if I go ahead and run the program now, so there's our data. Now, I can also adjust things like how the values are centered. So I want this to be left aligned, and I want these to be centered. And then I also want to adjust the column width so that title gets more space. And if I don't like the proportions here, I might want to adjust the size of this table here as well. So let's go ahead and start with the table. And here, let me go ahead and make this bigger again. So this preferred scrollable viewport size, that's how big the thing's actually going to be. And let's do 600 by 200 just to see that that made a difference. So let's go ahead and run it. Okay, so that's a little wider and a little shorter. Since it's already in a scroll pane, if I have more than however many rows will fit in here, I'll get a scroll bar automatically, a thumb that I can move around, which is what I want. And then, so I want to center these. So to center them, what I want to do is first I want to get the column model that's associated with this table, and that's pretty easy. So default column, table column model, columns is show table get column model. And it doesn't like that because it thinks I have a table column model instead of a default table column model. So let's go ahead and just do that. And then Alt plus Enter to import. So this is basically like an array of columns. It has a method called getColumn. So I can say columns dot get column, and then 0 is column 1, 1 is column 2, and so on, just as you'd expect. And then from here I can call like set min width, And let's go ahead and say that's going to be 200 pixels. And if I run it now, see, this is wider than it was before, and then these are getting proportionally less. And if I resize, it maintains the first column getting a little additional room. And if I make it shorter, you see I get that little scroll bar popping up when it's too short to contain all the rows. And then I could set the columns, each of the columns to have its own width. This time, for this one, I'm just going to set column 0 to be wider. And then to adjust the centering, what I want to do is get the cell renderer. So I can say default table cell renderer, center renderer is new default table cell renderer. And then I can call centerRender.set horizontal alignment, and that's going to be a JLabel center. So this is a center renderer, and then I can set columns.getColumn1 set cell renderer to be my center renderer. And then do the same thing for column 2 and column 3. There. So these three are centered. This one's still left. Maybe make this a little wider. Let's make it 250 instead. So let's go back here. Actually, right here. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me for now. I want to initialize these things with some actual values. So after calling create table, I'm going to create genre combo and create type combo. Private void create genre combo. So just like with tables, combo boxes have models as well. And so to set the data that shows up in that dropdown, I can do genre combo dot set model, and that's going to be a new default combo box model. And then here I can just go ahead and put in an array of strings. So new string array, which is initialized to, and then I'll just do some genres. So action, fantasy, drama, romance, sci-fi. And that should be it for that one. And then same thing for type. So that's going to create the type combo. And then the only thing that's different is the labels. So this will be movie, TV series, TV episode, short, whatever is in IMDb database. And really you could fetch it right out of IMDb, but like I said, we'll do that later. So let's go ahead and run it, see what we have. Okay, so now we have a little drop down, and I forgot to edit this. This should be my type combo. Great. So now I can select drama and select TV episode. Obviously I don't have any action listeners set up to handle any of those events yet. Only thing I want to do is add a piece of text to this box. So let's go ahead and select that box and edit the text. Use 50,000. And I hit tab again, so I have to remember to set that back to 0. And then run it. And that's it for my user interface for this video.